People said the sound of that champagne glass hitting the marble floor was louder than the orchestra. The music stopped first. Then came the silence. 200 guests inside the Whitmore Foundation ballroom turned at the exact same moment as Vivian Harper Coles stumbled backward beside the grand staircase, one hand instinctively protecting the curve of her 7-month pregnant belly, while crystal shards scattered across the polished white marble like ice under moonlight. The Manhattan skyline glowed behind her through 40-foot glass windows, cold and blue against the winter rain streaking down the building. Somewhere near the stage, a violinist lowered his bow mid-performance. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Nathaniel Grant Whitmore stood 3 feet away from his wife in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, his jaw tight, his expression calm in the way powerful men practiced for cameras and shareholders. But his eyes were different. Empty. Detached. Like he had already decided she no longer belonged in his world. Vivian looked at him as whispers started spreading across the ballroom tables. Wealthy donors. Politicians. CEOs. Socialites in diamond necklaces worth more than most American homes. All watching her. All pretending not to stare. "Nathan," she whispered, her voice shaking as another sharp cramp tightened through her abdomen. The baby kicked hard beneath her emerald silk gown, almost as if the little girl inside her could feel the tension flooding the room. Nathaniel adjusted his cufflinks slowly before answering. "You should have stayed upstairs." His voice was low, controlled, worse than yelling. Across the ballroom, Sabrina Vale Kensington stepped forward in a silver designer dress that shimmered beneath the chandelier light. Tall, blonde, beautiful in the cold, calculated way magazine covers loved. Her hand rested casually against Nathaniel's arm like she had every right to stand there beside him tonight. Vivian felt her stomach drop, not because of the affair she had known for months. The late-night business meetings, the hidden hotel receipts, the perfume that didn't belong to her lingering on Nathaniel's jackets after midnight. No. What shattered her wasn't the betrayal anymore. It was the humiliation. Public. Intentional. Final. Sabrina smiled softly, almost sympathetically, which somehow felt crueler. "Vivian," she said gently, her voice smooth as champagne. "You really should sit down before you stress yourself out." The room tightened around her. Nathaniel didn't defend his wife. Didn't step closer. Didn't even look embarrassed. Instead, he reached for Sabrina's champagne flute and handed it to her with the casual intimacy of people who no longer cared who was watching. That was when Vivian realized the gala was never meant to celebrate the Whitmore Foundation. It was meant to erase her. A camera flash exploded from somewhere near the press tables. Then another. The society photographers had sensed blood in the water. Vivian's breathing became shallow. Her pulse thundered inside her ears louder than the orchestra restarting awkwardly in the background. She turned slightly toward the staircase, desperate to escape the ballroom before the tears came. But the sharp heel of her shoe slid against spilled champagne on the marble floor. Gasps rippled across the crowd as her body tilted sideways for one terrifying second. Instantly her hands covered her stomach. Protect the baby. Nothing else mattered. Before she could hit the ground, a strong hand caught her elbow firmly. The grip was steady. Military steady. Vivian looked up into familiar green eyes she hadn't seen in almost a year. Caleb Hunter Cole, her older brother, former Navy SEAL. And judging by the deadly calm in his face as he looked toward Nathaniel Whitmore, he had just walked into the worst possible moment. The ballroom remained frozen as Caleb Hunter Cole steadied his sister against the marble staircase, his large hand firm around her trembling arm, while rain hammered softly against the glass walls 70 floors above Manhattan. Vivian could feel every pair of eyes in the room locked onto them. Wealthy donors pretending to sip champagne. Society women whispering behind diamond-covered fingers. Men in tailored tuxedos suddenly fascinated by the contents of their whiskey glasses. Nobody wanted to acknowledge what they had just witnessed, but nobody could look away either. Caleb glanced once at Vivian's pale face before lowering his eyes to the protective way she held her stomach. Something dark moved behind his expression. Not rage. Worse. Control. The kind forged through years of military discipline and dangerous places where panic got people killed. "Can you stand?" he asked quietly. Vivian nodded even though another wave of pressure tightened across her lower back. The baby shifted again beneath the silk fabric of her gown. Caleb noticed immediately. He always noticed everything. Across from them, Nathaniel Whitmore slipped one hand casually into his pocket, the picture of composed billionaire confidence, while flashes from the press cameras continued exploding near the ballroom entrance. "You are creating a scene," Nathaniel said calmly, though his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly when Caleb stepped fully between him and Vivian. Sabrina stayed close beside Nathaniel, but her polished smile had started fading around the edges. She had expected embarrassment tonight. Tears maybe. A quiet exit. Not Caleb Hunter Cole walking into the gala like a storm wrapped in a black suit. Vivian swallowed hard as memories surfaced all at once. 3 years ago, Nathaniel used to kiss her forehead before board meetings. He used to call her during lunch breaks just to hear her voice. Back when Whitmore Capital was struggling to survive its expansion into Silicon Valley, she had stayed awake beside him night after night reviewing presentations while secretly selling pieces of her late mother's jewelry to help cover expenses he never knew about. She remembered tiny apartments before the penthouse, cheap coffee at 2 in the morning, Nathaniel promising her they were building a future together. Somewhere along the way, success had hollowed him out. The private jets came first, then the political dinners, then the silence at home. Cold silences that stretched across 20,000 square feet of marble and glass. Vivian had spent months convincing herself it was stress, pressure, temporary distance, until the night she found Sabrina's diamond bracelet inside Nathaniel's suitcase after a conference in Aspen. Nathaniel took one slow step forward now, lowering his voice carefully for the audience surrounding them. "Vivian is emotional. She should not have come downstairs in her condition." The words landed like ice water. In her condition, as if pregnancy had made her inconvenient, weak, temporary. Caleb's eyes lifted slowly toward Nathaniel. "Funny," he said quietly, "because she looked fine until your girlfriend started performing for the cameras." A murmur rippled through nearby tables. Sabrina folded her arms immediately. "I think you are misunderstanding the situation." "No," Caleb replied. "I think everyone here finally understands it perfectly." Silence swallowed the ballroom again. Somewhere near the orchestra stage, a waiter accidentally dropped a silver serving tray. The sharp clang echoed through the room like a warning bell. Vivian suddenly noticed movement near the press section. A young photographer in a navy suit was rapidly checking images on his camera screen, zooming in frame by frame. Her stomach tightened for a different reason now. The staircase. Sabrina standing close beside Nathaniel. Her own terrified expression moments before slipping. Evidence. Real evidence. Caleb noticed the photographer too. Of course he did. His gaze narrowed slightly before he looked back at Vivian. "You need to leave," he said softly. "Right now." But before Vivian could answer, the giant LED screen behind the ballroom stage flickered once, then twice. Conversation stopped instantly as every light in the room dimmed without warning. And suddenly, security footage filled the screen. The massive LED screen behind the orchestra flickered violently once before security footage flooded across 20 feet of crystal-clear display, washing the ballroom in cold blue light. Every conversation died instantly. Vivian felt Caleb's hand tighten around her arm as hundreds of guests turned toward the screen in complete silence. The footage showed the grand staircase from above only minutes earlier. Time-stamped. Sharp. Unavoidable. Nathaniel's charity gala logo glowed in the corner beside the live feed marker from the ballroom security system. Someone had hacked directly into the event network. A nervous murmur spread through the crowd as the video replayed Vivian standing near the staircase alone, visibly pregnant beneath her emerald gown, while guests moved around her carrying champagne glasses and auction catalogs. Then Sabrina entered frame. Even from the overhead angle, her body language looked aggressive. Intentional. The ballroom remained so quiet Vivian could hear the faint hum of the projector system above the chandeliers. Nathaniel's face hardened immediately. "Turn it off," he snapped toward the security staff near the entrance, but nobody moved fast enough. On screen, Sabrina stepped closer to Vivian. The footage had no audio, yet the tension between them was unmistakable. Sabrina leaned forward smiling, while Vivian's shoulders visibly stiffened. Then came the moment that changed the room forever. Sabrina reached toward Vivian's arm during the argument. One sharp movement. One misstep near the spilled champagne beside the marble staircase. Gasps echoed throughout the ballroom as the footage showed Vivian losing balance while trying to shield her stomach instinctively with both hands. Caleb, catching her seconds later, played across the giant screen in brutal slow motion. Not staged. Not edited. Real. The wealthy guests who had spent the last 10 minutes pretending nothing happened now shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Society women exchanged horrified looks. One older senator quietly set down his whiskey glass and walked away from Nathaniel's donor table without saying a word. Sabrina's face drained of color beneath the chandelier light. "That is not what happened," she said quickly, her polished voice cracking for the first time all night. "The camera angle is misleading." But nobody was looking at her anymore. They were staring at Nathaniel, waiting, measuring him. The billionaire who built an empire selling trust and leadership suddenly looked very alone beneath the ballroom lights. Vivian could actually see the calculation happening behind his eyes. Damage control, public relations, shareholders, election donors, headlines by morning. Nathaniel stepped toward the stage with controlled urgency. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began smoothly, forcing calm into his tone. "This is clearly a misunderstanding being exploited for attention." Caleb let out one quiet laugh beside Vivian. It was not humor. It was disbelief. Then another screen lit up. Smaller this time. One of the ballroom monitors near the donor tables switched to a paused image from a smartphone camera. Sabrina and Nathaniel together outside a Manhattan hotel 3 months earlier. Time-stamped at 2:17 in the morning. Another image followed automatically. Aspen, Paris, Miami. Different dates. Different cities. Same betrayal. The ballroom erupted into whispers loud enough to drown out the orchestra completely now. Vivian felt her heartbeat pounding beneath her ribs as realization spread through the room like wildfire. Someone had not only leaked the staircase footage. Someone had prepared this. Carefully. Methodically. Nathaniel's expression darkened for the first time that evening. "Who is doing this?" he demanded sharply. No answer came. Then a familiar voice echoed calmly through the ballroom sound system overhead. "Female. Controlled. Dangerous. That would be me." Every head turned toward the upper balcony overlooking the gala floor as Olivia Bennett Hayes stepped out of the shadows in a white tailored suit, one hand holding a tablet while the other rested casually against the glass railing. Manhattan's most feared divorce attorney looked down at the ballroom with terrifying composure. "Good evening," she said softly. "I represent Mrs. Vivian Harper Cole Whitmore." The rain outside intensified against the glass walls as Olivia Bennett Hayes descended the curved marble staircase overlooking the ballroom, her white heels clicking softly through the silence, while every billionaire donor and political figure in the room watched Nathaniel Whitmore lose control 1 inch at a time. Vivian had seen Olivia destroy men in courtrooms before. Manhattan called her the Ice Queen of divorce law because she never raised her voice and never lost. But tonight felt different. Personal. Olivia reached the ballroom floor with calm precision, tablet still in her hand, her sharp gray eyes moving briefly toward Vivian's pale face. Before settling directly on Nathaniel, "I advised my client to remain quiet for months," Olivia said evenly. "Unfortunately, your behavior tonight made that impossible." Nathaniel's expression darkened beneath the chandelier light. "You illegally accessed private event systems." "No," Olivia replied. "Your own security team preserved the footage automatically the moment physical instability near the staircase triggered the ballroom safety protocol." A ripple of whispers spread instantly through nearby tables. Nathaniel looked toward his security director near the entrance. The man avoided eye contact completely. That tiny moment told Vivian everything. Nathaniel no longer controlled the room. Sabrina stepped forward abruptly, wrapping both arms around herself as flashes from photographers continued exploding around the ballroom. "This is harassment," she snapped. "You are publicly humiliating people based on assumptions." Olivia tilted her head slightly. "Miss Kensington, would you like me to continue with the hotel invoices or the offshore transfers first?" Sabrina froze. Actual fear crossed her face now. Nathaniel immediately moved toward Olivia, lowering his voice sharply. "This ends tonight." Olivia did not blink. It already did. Then she tapped the screen of her tablet once more. New documents appeared across the giant ballroom display. Financial statements. Property transfers. Luxury purchases connected to accounts hidden beneath shell corporations. The ballroom erupted into louder whispers as recognizable names and numbers flashed across the screen beside dates spanning nearly 2 years. Vivian felt the air leave her lungs slowly. Offshore accounts. Secret penthouse purchases in Miami. Jewelry invoices worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Nathaniel had hidden everything while repeatedly telling her the company needed financial restraint, while convincing her to postpone nursery renovations for their daughter, while asking her to be patient during difficult quarters. Caleb's jaw tightened beside her as another file appeared on screen labeled Kensington Consulting Holdings. Sabrina visibly staggered backward one step. "Oh my God," someone whispered. Near the donor tables, Nathaniel finally lost the polished billionaire mask completely. "Enough," he barked, his voice echoing violently through the ballroom for the first time all evening. Conversation stopped instantly. Even the photographers lowered their cameras. Nathaniel looked directly at Vivian now, not with guilt but frustration, as though she had inconvenienced him publicly in ways he could not forgive. "You are allowing your brother and this attorney to destroy our family." The words hit Vivian harder than she expected. Family. He still used the word after everything. Her fingers instinctively touched the curve of her stomach again as her daughter shifted beneath the silk gown. Suddenly, she remembered another night almost 8 months earlier. Nathaniel kneeling beside her bathroom floor after they discovered the pregnancy test. Tears in his eyes, hands trembling as he kissed her forehead whispering, "We are finally going to be parents." Vivian had believed him completely. That memory hurt worse than the betrayal itself. Olivia's voice cut through the silence again like glass. "No, Mr. Whitmore. You destroyed your family long before tonight." Then the ballroom doors opened. Cold wind swept briefly across the marble floor as 3 men in dark suits entered carrying silver briefcases and legal folders. One of them approached Olivia quietly and handed her a thick document packet. Caleb noticed the gold seal immediately. So did Nathaniel. His face drained of color for the first time all night. Olivia opened the folder slowly before looking up with terrifying calm. "The emergency injunction has officially been approved," she said. "As of 12 minutes ago, all joint financial assets connected to Vivian Harper Whitmore are frozen pending investigation." The ballroom stopped breathing again. For 3 full seconds, nobody inside the ballroom moved after Olivia announced the financial freeze. Then the whispers exploded like wildfire beneath the chandeliers. Donors reached for their phones. Investors stepped away from Nathaniel's table. Society reporters near the stage typed furiously while camera flashes reflected across the marble walls in relentless bursts of white light. Vivian suddenly realized this was no longer private humiliation. This was public collapse. Nathaniel stood perfectly still near the center of the ballroom, but the tension in his face had changed completely. The calm billionaire image was cracking under pressure now. His eyes darted toward the giant screens still displaying offshore transfers and hidden purchases linked to Sabrina. Millions of dollars. Secret accounts. Luxury properties hidden during a marriage built publicly on trust and philanthropy. Caleb leaned slightly closer to Vivian. "Breathe slowly," he said quietly without taking his eyes off Nathaniel. "Your blood pressure is climbing." She nodded faintly, though her chest felt tight beneath the emerald gown. The baby shifted again as another sharp pulse of stress rolled through her body. Across the ballroom, Sabrina stepped backward in disbelief while 2 members of Nathaniel's executive board quietly gathered their coats near the donor tables. One of them refused to even look in Nathaniel's direction as he walked away. That hurt Nathaniel more than the cameras ever could. Vivian knew him well enough to see it instantly. Reputation was everything to him. Power, control, admiration. And tonight all 3 were slipping through his fingers in real time. "This is temporary," Nathaniel said sharply, raising his voice above the noise spreading through the ballroom. "My legal team will resolve this misunderstanding immediately." Olivia closed the folder in her hands with slow precision. "Actually, federal financial investigators may disagree with you." Silence slammed back into the room. Even the orchestra members stopped pretending to organize their instruments now. Nathaniel stared at her. "What did you say?" Olivia held his gaze steadily. "The transfers connected to Kensington Consulting triggered automatic review protocols after irregular movement across international accounts linked to Whitmore Capital charitable foundations." Sabrina's face turned completely pale. "Nathaniel," she whispered. But he ignored her. For the first time all night, genuine uncertainty crossed his expression. Vivian watched him carefully and realized something terrifying. Nathaniel had not expected this level of exposure. He thought he controlled every variable, every person, every outcome. Caleb folded his arms slowly beside his sister. "You should have left her alone," he said quietly. Nathaniel looked toward him instantly. "Stay out of my marriage." Caleb's expression never changed. "You made it everyone's business the moment you humiliated my pregnant sister in front of half of Manhattan." The words landed hard because nobody could deny them anymore. Vivian suddenly became aware of dozens of eyes watching her differently now. Not with pity, with sympathy. The wealthy women near the auction tables who had avoided eye contact earlier were staring openly at Nathaniel with disgust. One older woman even shook her head slowly before walking away beside her husband. Nathaniel noticed every second of it. His empire had always depended on perception, and perception was turning against him by the minute. Then another voice echoed across the ballroom unexpectedly. "Sir." Everyone turned toward the entrance where Nathaniel's head of security stood holding a phone tightly in his hand. The man looked visibly nervous. "You need to see this immediately." Nathaniel snatched the phone from him with irritation, but the moment he looked at the screen his face lost all remaining color. Vivian felt her heartbeat slow strangely as she watched him. Nathaniel Whitmore looked afraid. Truly afraid. Sabrina stepped closer. "What is it?" He did not answer her. Instead, he lifted his eyes slowly toward Olivia, who leaked the internal audit files. Olivia smiled faintly for the first time that evening. "Cold. Controlled. Dangerous. Not who," she corrected softly. "Whom you forgot existed." Then the ballroom screens changed again. A new image appeared across 20 feet of glowing display. Vivian gasped quietly the moment she recognized the face staring back at the room. An older man with silver hair, sharp blue eyes. Former Whitmore Capital co-founder Daniel Mercer. The billionaire Nathaniel forced out of the company 7 years earlier. The moment Daniel Mercer's face appeared across the ballroom screens, the temperature inside the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Vivian watched shock ripple through Manhattan's elite like electricity beneath the chandeliers. Some of the older investors near the donor tables exchanged alarmed looks immediately. They knew exactly who Daniel Mercer was. The billionaire co-founder Nathaniel Whitmore publicly blamed for Whitmore Capital's near collapse 7 years earlier. The man financial magazines once called a traitor. Except now his silver-haired image filled every screen inside Nathaniel's own charity gala, while camera flashes exploded non-stop across the ballroom. Nathaniel stared upward in complete disbelief. "That is impossible," he said under his breath. Caleb noticed the shift instantly. "You buried him professionally," he murmured. "Guess he survived." Then Daniel Mercer began speaking through the ballroom sound system. Calm, controlled, older now, but still carrying the unmistakable authority of a man who once built billion-dollar empires from nothing. "Good evening, everyone," Daniel said smoothly from the recorded video message. "If you are seeing this tonight, it means Nathaniel Grant Whitmore finally made the mistake I spent 7 years waiting for." The ballroom fell completely silent again. Vivian could hear the soft rain against the glass walls high above Manhattan and the distant hum of traffic far below the tower. Nathaniel stepped toward the stage violently enough to knock over a champagne glass beside the podium. Crystal shattered across the marble floor. Nobody flinched. Nobody rushed to help him. "Shut this off now," he ordered his security team. But 2 security guards near the control station hesitated awkwardly before lowering their eyes. Caleb noticed that too. Nathaniel was losing loyalty in real time. Daniel continued, speaking overhead. 7 years ago, I warned Whitmore Capital's board that Nathaniel was moving company funds through offshore entities tied to personal interests. I was removed before the investigation could move forward. Gasps spread across the ballroom as legal documents appeared beside Daniel's image. Signed memos, internal emails, banking records. Olivia stood near the staircase, completely calm while Nathaniel's carefully constructed empire unraveled piece by piece around him. Vivian suddenly remembered the night Nathaniel forced her to cancel dinner plans because of an emergency board meeting almost 2 years earlier. He came home after midnight furious and silent, pouring whiskey alone in the penthouse while staring at the city lights for nearly an hour without speaking to her. That had been the same week Daniel Mercer disappeared from every financial headline in America. Vivian's chest tightened painfully at how blind love had made her. Nathaniel manipulated media outlets, shareholders, and board members to protect his image, Daniel continued. But greed always creates patterns, and patterns eventually leave evidence. Sabrina stepped backward again, visibly panicking now as new files filled the screens. Private flight logs, corporate transfers, luxury condo purchases linked to shell companies connected directly to her consulting business. No, she whispered. No, no, no. Nathaniel finally snapped toward her. Stop panicking. But his own voice shook slightly now. Vivian noticed it immediately. So did everyone else. The billionaire who once controlled entire rooms with a glance suddenly looked like a man drowning beneath camera flashes and whispers. One of the investors near the orchestra quietly stood up. Then another. Soon entire tables of wealthy donors began gathering coats and phones, leaving the gala floor without speaking to Nathaniel at all. The sound of expensive shoes crossing marble echoed through the ballroom like a funeral procession. Olivia glanced toward Vivian carefully. This part matters, she said softly. Vivian frowned faintly. What part? Olivia looked toward the exits where investors continued abandoning the ballroom. The moment powerful people decide someone is no longer untouchable. Nathaniel heard her. His face darkened with something colder than anger now. Fear. Real fear. Then his phone began vibrating violently in his pocket. Once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. He pulled it out impatiently before freezing completely at whatever appeared on the screen. Vivian watched all remaining color disappear from his face, as he whispered one sentence barely loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. The board just suspended me. The words spread through the ballroom faster than the rain hammering the glass walls outside. Suspended. Nathaniel Whitmore had just been removed from his own company while standing beneath the crystal chandeliers of the empire he built. Vivian watched the realization settle across his face like ice cracking under pressure. For years he had controlled every room he entered, every conversation, every headline, and now investors were walking past him without even pretending to hide their disgust. The orchestra members quietly packed away violins near the stage while waiters avoided eye contact completely. Sabrina reached for Nathaniel's arm instinctively, but he pulled away from her without even looking. That hurt her more than the cameras. Nathaniel, she whispered urgently, you need to say something. He finally turned toward her sharply. You already said enough for both of us. Vivian saw the panic flash across Sabrina's face as reporters near the ballroom entrance immediately lifted phones higher, recording every second. Olivia stood motionless beside the staircase, calm as winter itself, while legal teams in dark suits moved quietly through the room, handing sealed folders to Whitmore Capital board members. Caleb leaned closer toward Vivian again. How are you holding up? He asked softly. She wanted to answer honestly, but the truth felt too complicated for words. Hurt, relieved, exhausted, heartbroken. Somewhere beneath all of it, another feeling slowly emerged for the first time in months. Freedom. Nathaniel suddenly stepped forward toward Vivian through the crowd, ignoring the cameras now flashing nonstop around him. Vivian, he said, his voice lower than before, almost desperate beneath the anger. You know me. You know who I really am. Caleb instantly moved between them. Careful. But Nathaniel kept his eyes locked on his wife. They manipulated this entire situation, he insisted. Daniel Mercer has wanted revenge for years. Vivian stared at him quietly beneath the ballroom lights. For one painful second, she remembered the version of Nathaniel she married. The ambitious young man who used to dance with her barefoot in their first apartment kitchen while takeout containers sat on the counter because they could not afford restaurants yet. The man who promised success would never change them. That memory almost broke her. Almost. Then she looked toward the giant screens still glowing above the ballroom with hidden transfers, hotel photos, and offshore accounts connected to years of lies. Nathaniel followed her gaze briefly before lowering his voice further. I can fix this. Vivian felt something inside her finally go still. Not anger. Not sadness. Acceptance. No, she said softly. You cannot. The sentence landed harder than any scream could have. Nathaniel froze completely. Around them, conversation slowed as nearby guests realized they were witnessing the real ending now. Not financial collapse. Personal collapse. The destruction of a man who thought power could erase consequences forever. Sabrina looked between them anxiously. Nathaniel, we should leave. He ignored her entirely. Vivian noticed that too. The woman he risked everything for had already become another problem to manage. Olivia stepped forward calmly, handing Vivian a cream-colored envelope embossed with silver lettering. You should have this now, she said gently. Vivian frowned faintly before opening it carefully with trembling fingers. Inside rested copies of legal ownership documents tied to Whitmore Capital. Her eyes widened immediately. What is this? Olivia's expression softened for the first time all night. Your shares. Nathaniel's head snapped upward instantly. What? Olivia met his stare directly. 3 years ago, during the restructuring period when the company faced bankruptcy risk, Vivian quietly acquired equity through private investment protections attached to your emergency capital stabilization package. Vivian blinked in confusion. Wait, what? Caleb smiled faintly beside her. Mom's inheritance, he said softly. Memories crashed into her all at once. The jewelry she sold. The hidden trust account from her mother. The documents Nathaniel rushed her into signing during the company crisis because he claimed lawyers needed immediate authorization to save Whitmore Capital from collapse. Nathaniel stared at Vivian now like he was seeing a stranger. Olivia closed the folder gently. Congratulations, she said calmly. As of tonight, Vivian Harper Cole Whitmore remains one of the largest individual shareholders in the company you just lost. The silence after Olivia's revelation felt heavier than the storm outside. Vivian stood motionless beneath the crystal chandeliers, one hand resting protectively against her stomach, while the ballroom stared at her with a completely different kind of attention now. Not pity. Respect. Nathaniel looked as though the ground beneath him had disappeared. That is impossible, he said quietly, but the confidence was gone from his voice now. Gone from his posture. Gone from the sharp billionaire image he spent years building. Olivia calmly removed another document from the folder and handed it directly to him. You signed the restructuring authorization yourself during the emergency stabilization period, she said. Vivian's private inheritance trust became one of the largest silent investments protecting Whitmore Capital from bankruptcy. Nathaniel scanned the papers rapidly, his face draining further with every line. Vivian suddenly remembered that winter perfectly now. The sleepless nights. The panic attacks Nathaniel thought she never noticed. The board threatening to dissolve major assets. She had quietly liquidated nearly everything her mother left her because she believed in him, because she loved him, and he never even realized who saved the company he worshipped more than his marriage. Caleb watched Nathaniel carefully. Funny thing about loyalty, he said softly. Most people only recognize it after they destroy it. Nearby investors had stopped pretending to leave discreetly. Entire groups openly exited the ballroom now, while reporters gathered near the entrance like sharks circling blood in dark water. Nathaniel's phone continued vibrating nonstop in his hand. Missed calls, emergency alerts, financial media requests. One breaking news banner suddenly appeared across the ballroom television monitors near the bar. Whitmore. Capital stock falls 23% after charity gala scandal. A low murmur rolled through the remaining guests. Sabrina stared at the screen in horror before turning toward Nathaniel again. We need to get ahead of this publicly, she whispered urgently. We should release a statement tonight. Nathaniel looked at her slowly. Really looked at her for the first time all evening. Vivian watched realization settle across his face as the illusion finally shattered. Sabrina had loved the power, the access, the luxury. But now the empire was collapsing beneath camera flashes and legal investigations. And fear had already replaced affection in her eyes. Nathaniel stepped away from her silently. Sabrina blinked in disbelief. Nathaniel. He said nothing. The rejection hit harder because it happened publicly, in front of everyone. The same way Vivian had been humiliated earlier that night. Olivia checked her watch calmly. Federal investigators will likely arrive within the hour, she said. You should prepare yourself. Nathaniel laughed once under his breath. Bitter. Hollow. You planned all of this. Olivia tilted her head slightly. No, you did. We simply stopped protecting you from the consequences. Vivian felt another movement from the baby beneath her gown and instinctively smiled for the first time that evening. Tiny, fragile, real. Caleb noticed immediately. There she is, he murmured softly. Vivian looked around the ballroom slowly. The shattered crystal near the staircase still glittered beneath the lights. Half-empty champagne glasses sat abandoned across donor tables. Wealthy strangers whispered her name now instead of ignoring her existence. Nathaniel Whitmore remained standing alone near the center of the room, while everything around him collapsed piece by piece. Then the final blow arrived quietly. One of Whitmore Capital's senior board members approached through the crowd carrying a sealed envelope. The older man looked exhausted, disappointed. "Nathaniel," he said carefully, "the board voted unanimously 20 minutes ago." Nathaniel did not move. The man handed him the envelope anyway. "Your executive authority has been permanently revoked. Effective immediately." Nobody spoke. Nobody breathed. Nathaniel lowered his eyes to the paper slowly while flashes from dozens of cameras illuminated the marble ballroom in cold white bursts. Vivian watched the most powerful man she had ever known suddenly look small beneath the chandeliers. Smaller than the room. Smaller than his ego. Smaller than the woman he spent years underestimating. Then Caleb gently placed Vivian's coat over her shoulders. "Come on," he said quietly. "It is time to go home." 3 months later, the first snow of December drifted softly across Manhattan as Vivian Harper Cole stepped out of a black town car in front of the Whitmore Children's Medical Center, one hand resting gently against the sleeping newborn cradled against her chest beneath a cream-colored cashmere blanket. Camera flashes erupted instantly across the sidewalk, but this time the noise no longer made her flinch. Reporters called her name from behind security barriers, while television crews fought for better angles beneath the cold morning sky. Vivian paused only briefly before looking up at the massive silver letters mounted above the hospital entrance. Whitmore Children's Medical Center. The name had remained. Everything else had changed. Caleb walked beside her in a charcoal overcoat, one protective hand near her shoulder out of habit more than necessity. Olivia followed behind them carrying legal folders, while hospital administrators waited near the entrance with nervous smiles and polished rehearsed greetings. Vivian barely heard any of it. Her daughter shifted softly against her chest, tiny fingers curling around the edge of the blanket. Amelia Grace Cole Whitmore. 6 pounds. 4 ounces. Blue eyes exactly like her mother's. The doctor said she was perfectly healthy. That mattered more than every headline in America. Vivian stepped inside the hospital lobby where Christmas lights reflected across marble floors and giant glass windows overlooking the city. The scent of pine and fresh coffee drifted through the warm air, while nurses moved quietly between reception desks decorated with silver ribbons. Peaceful. Calm. Nothing like the ballroom 3 months earlier, where her old life shattered beneath crystal chandeliers and camera flashes. "Mrs. Cole," a reporter shouted from outside the entrance before security doors closed behind her. "Do you have any comment regarding Nathaniel Whitmore's sentencing hearing next week?" Vivian stopped walking for only a second. Sentencing. The word still sounded unreal sometimes. Federal fraud investigations uncovered years of financial manipulation tied to offshore accounts and corporate misrepresentation. Sabrina Kensington vanished from public view almost immediately after agreeing to cooperate with investigators. Whitmore Capital survived under emergency restructuring led by a new executive board. Nathaniel Whitmore lost everything else. His company, his reputation, his political influence. Almost every wealthy friend who once crowded his gala tables disappeared overnight. Vivian never attended a single hearing after filing for divorce. She did not need to watch his empire collapse to know it had ended. Olivia once told her something during the legal proceedings that stayed with her afterward. Real power is walking away after the truth finally arrives. Vivian understood that now. She looked down at her sleeping daughter and smiled faintly before continuing through the hospital lobby toward the pediatric wing, funded quietly through her own majority shareholder settlement. Not revenge. Legacy. Caleb opened the elevator doors gently, while nurses nearby whispered excitedly after recognizing her. One of them stepped forward carefully. "Mrs. Cole," she said softly, "thank you for keeping the children's wing open after the restructuring. A lot of families needed this place." Vivian felt emotion tighten briefly in her throat. "So did mine," she answered quietly. The elevator doors slid closed around them with a soft chime. As the car rose above Manhattan, Vivian caught her reflection in the mirrored walls. No designer gala gown tonight. No diamonds. No cameras inside this quiet elevator. Just a mother holding her child while snow drifted silently across the city beyond the glass. Caleb glanced toward her with the same protective expression he carried since childhood. You okay? Vivian looked down at Amelia sleeping peacefully against her chest while tiny snowflakes blurred the skyline outside. Then she nodded slowly. For the first time in a long time, she whispered, I think we finally are. Somewhere far below them the city kept moving. Traffic lights. Headlines. Billionaires rising and falling beneath winter skies. But inside the quiet elevator, none of that mattered anymore. Because some men spend their whole lives building empires only to discover too late that the one thing truly worth protecting was the woman who once believed in them when they had absolutely nothing.